Hello, you're watching James. My name's James, you're watching me, and I'm talking about watches. Today I'm going to talk about the journey that I've been on to try and own a watch that clearly resembles the Casio Full Metal G-Shock GMW B5000D-1D, but on a bit more of a modest budget. Within Australia, you can get the Full Metal G-Shock between about $700 to $1,100 Australian. For me, I can't quite justify spending that on a G-Shock, even though I really like it. So I've tried to achieve it through a couple of different ways, and I've done a few reviews on the watches that I've bought and on the watches that I've modified. Today I'm going to put all the watches that I've bought side by side, and I'm going to go through them and see what they're like comparably together. I'm not going to do full reviews of each watch. I've done that previously. If you are interested in those full reviews, please have a look through my previous videos and they'll be there for you to view. However, what I do want to do is see how they compare against each other, what the positives and negatives are comparable to each other, not so much in regards to the watches themselves. Then at the end of that sort of comparison video, I'm going to come back and I'm going to tell you what I actually ended up doing and perhaps give you some recommendations on what I think you should do if you're also trying to achieve a more modestly priced Full Metal G-Shock. Alright, so I'm going to flick the camera around and we're going to talk about these three watches, the SKMEI, the Sounder and the Casio G-Shock DW5600, which I have modified. Alright, let's turn this camera around and let's have a look at these three watches side by side. So today's not a full review about the watches themselves. I just want to put them side by side, show you the positives and negatives compared to each other. Firstly, let's just put them nice and close together so you can get an understanding of a size comparison. They are fairly similar in size. Obviously, because they're being homaged to a specific watch, they are trying to look like that, so they have a bit of a similar feel to them. Overall thicknesses and weights vary a little bit, but they're very similar. You'll find with the Sounder versus the SKMEI that the bracelet is a little bit thinner. You'll find with the Sounder versus the modified G-Shock, it's actually a little bit thicker. So you'll see that the difference in the widths of the two watch bracelets. In regards to quality, this one's terrible, this one's not too bad, this one's very good. When you're looking at the quality of the bracelet, the Sounder is very jingly and jangly. You can see that it gets a little bit stuck and it's a folded metal. The SKMEI is also a little bit jangly, but it has a lot more better movement and it certainly feels and looks better as well. However, both are made of folded steel construction. The modified G-Shock also has a little bit of a jingly jangly sound, but that's just due to the gaps in the bracelet, creating those distances, creating that jingle sound. It is a full solid construction bracelet. The quality of the overall head of the watch construction, the Sounder is fairly basic, the words aren't very defined. The SKMEI is actually rather well done. It's not perfect, it's a little bit rounded on the edges where it should be a little bit crisper, but it has a nice pattern on the surface. The words aren't too bad, and the buttons are particularly nice. The construction of the modification kit used on this G-Shock is very good. The construction is nice, it is full steel, the wording is nice, crisp and clear. There is a significant difference in the clasps of the bracelets. The Sounder is terrible, it's probably the worst clasp I've ever come across. The SKMEI looks nice, it feels nice, however it's still a pressed steel construction. The modified G-Shock is amazing. It feels good, it looks good, and it's a full steel milled construction. The size comparison of the clasps, as you can see, is actually quite different. The positives of this Sounder are fairly limited. However, because the effective lug-to-lug actually drops down versus the other two that have a larger effective lug size, means that this watch actually fits not too bad on my wrist. However, I don't want it on my wrist because it's not a very nice watch overall. The bracelet feels terrible, the clasp is terrible. The negative display, although it looks okay, is quite hard to read. The big positive for this one though is the backlit light, which is very clear and very legible to read. Right now I'm going to put that one aside because no matter what, I just don't think you should be buying this watch. So please disregard this under. So how do these two compare? Overall, the quality of the modified G-Shock is certainly better. It is a nice solid steel, the bracelet is solid, the clasp is very nice. However, I don't like the big gaps in the bracelet. However, I can forgive that because it does feel nice. However, that effective lug to lug is so large that it doesn't sit very well on my 6 3/4 inch wrist. Overall, the SKMEI actually feels okay. The folded metal bracelet, albeit folded, feels and looks quite good. The clasp is not amazing underneath, but when you have it on the wrist, it does look okay and it certainly is comfortable. The buttons are very nice and easy to push on the SKMEI. The buttons on the modified G-Shock are a little bit harder to get to. The light on the SKMEI certainly works and is very legible at night, but it doesn't have that nice crisp feel that the other one does. The light on the modified G-Shock is obviously very good, very legible, obviously being the illuminator version of this watch. From an overall size comparison, the SKMEI feels a little bit bigger in your hand and on the wrist, but they both have that very large effective lug-to-lug size which causes me so many issues. Both are very legible and easy to read. Obviously the DW5600 series has all the markings of that watch, whereas the SKMEI is clearly copying the full metal Casio G-Shock with those little brick patterns and the wording on it. When you have these two watches in hand, the modified G-Shock certainly has a little bit more weight to it. It certainly feels nicer as well. You'll see both have a little bit of an issue when transitioning from one material to the other, from what's on the head of the watch to what's on the bracelet. And both are going to attract a few scratches whilst wearing them. So a quick recap. This one, terrible, get rid of it. This one's actually fairly good when you consider the price. This one's fantastic if it does fit your wrist. And here's a look at all three watches on my 6 3/4 inch wrist. Let's flip back around and I'll give you some of my final thoughts. So there are those three watches side by side. I hope that you've learned something. I think at least you might be able to get the information that you can discount that Sander watch. You're better off going for the SKMEI for the money. So what am I actually going to do? Well, as I've said, the G-Shock that has been modified is the best quality watch out of all of them. And preferably this is the watch I would have liked to have kept. But for the money, I just don't think it's worth it since it doesn't fit. So what about the SKMEI? Realistically, for the price, I think it's really cheap and you actually get quite a good watch. So it's probably going to be the one that I end up keeping. It still doesn't fit me perfectly. However, at that price point, I don't really mind so much. If it gets banged around, scratched or destroyed, well, so be it. I'm okay with that. So my final thoughts are, if you have a wrist that is over 7.5 inches, go for the G-Shock modified. I think it's the best option for you. However, if you've got a wrist that's under that and you still want one and you don't mind about that slightly oversized lugs, then don't waste so much money on the modified G-Shock. Go for the SKMEI for 20 something dollars Australian. Really, it's not going to break the bank. You get a bit of a feel for it. But for me, value for money versus comfort versus size versus fit versus quality of materials, I'm actually going to go for the little SKMEI. However, I still do want a better fitting full metal G-Shock type watch. So I think my journey is actually going to continue. I'm going to look outside the G-Shock range and try and find something that ticks the boxes of what I need. So I'm going to keep looking. And if I do find something, I'll be picking it up. Hopefully it fits me better. Hopefully I'm happier with it, and I'll do some reviews on it so you'll get to see it sometime in the future. Thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you did like the video, please subscribe. It makes a big difference to the channel. I hope to see you again in the next video.